Coast up to 71 today, inland 77, the mountains 67, and the deserts 92. Right now downtown, it is partly cloudy, 58 degrees. Kogo News Time, 6:41.
Well, it's boomers versus millennials at work. In many offices, you can have a great divide between the texting generation and the talking generation. So can we all just get along here?
I don't know. Let's find out. Joining us on the Kogo News Live line is sales and leadership analyst Jerry Acuff. And I got your last name right, didn't I?
You did.
All right, awesome. So how are millennials shaping the workforce these days?
Well, they're shaping it in a big way because there's so many of them. I mean, there's actually, I don't know, depending on what numbers you look at, there's 3 to 8 million more millennials than there are baby boomers, and so they make up a huge part of the workforce. And if you look at the projections, they're going to make a much larger impact on the workforce. And the reality is just the sheer number says that we, as baby boomers, if we are baby boomers, have to really try and understand just how do they see work. They see work differently than we do. They look at work differently. They look at relationships differently. They look at technology differently. They were raised differently. And I think, you know, trying to understand how they view the world is incredibly important. There are very few human interactions where understanding isn't the key driver in success. And, you know, in our country, we got a short supply of understanding as I see it. And it's certainly no less true in this sort of divide between millennials and boomers.
What is one of the biggest differences between, you know, on the approach to work, one of the biggest differences between the boomers and the millennials, and how do you bridge that gap?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that, you know, boomers see work as a necessity because work defined us. And, you know, and whether we like the job. And look, I got into sales. I didn't want to be in sales. I just couldn't find anything else to do. And I didn't want to be there. I mean, I didn't go with some purpose. Now I have purpose now, but millennials don't do that. Millennials work for purpose. And it's one of the reasons why they'll change jobs more frequently, because they're constantly in search of purpose. Now, once they find an opportunity where they feel that they have purpose, where they're working for a coach, not a boss. I mean, boss spelled backwards is double S-O-B. Once they do that, because of their intimate connection with their purpose, they're unbelievable workers. And especially if they were raised where hard work is valued, where having a servant's mentality is valued. And so a lot of this is really dependent on how they were raised. But the biggest difference is that we work because we have to. We never really thought about purpose at work. I mean, we might have discovered purpose at work, but it wasn't the thing that drove us to find employment. It is what drives millennials in many cases to find employment, is how is this going to make me feel that I'm doing something meaningful.
So you mentioned sales. Now, how are millennials succeeding, and they are, when it comes to sales?
Well, I mean, what they're doing is, number one, they're calling on other millennials. And so, you know, to sell Jane Brown what Jane Brown buys, you have to see the world through Jane Brown's eyes. You know, my book on sales is called Stop Acting Like a Seller, Start Thinking Like a Buyer. So whether you're a millennial calling on a baby boomer or a millennial calling on a millennial, you need to think like the other person. Now, that requires that you actually try and understand the other person. So millennials are learning that fairly quickly because it's what they're being taught by people who've had success in sales. And if they're connected, you know, if they see this sales opportunity as something that creates purpose, then they're far invested in willing to learn whatever it takes to learn. The thing that makes them really effective is their ability to think about how to work more efficiently and more effectively. You know, they think about routing differently. They think about how you use, you know, GPS systems to make more calls. They think about how you use technology to learn about people before you actually go there. You know, when I started in sales, the way you learned about somebody was you went and met with them. You sat and talked to them, and it might take you 3, 4, 5 visits before that person felt they connect with you. Millennials use Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram to actually learn about people before they go there. And if they're really astute, they figure out, how do I use that so I don't sound like a stalker, but how do I use that so that you realize that I did my homework before I got here? So they're really good at using technology. And that's one of the things I've learned from my mentor, who's a millennial, because I realized that, you know, I want to learn something. I want to learn something from somebody who knows something I don't know. So I have a millennial mentor and I got a boomer mentor.
Jerry Acuff with us here on the Kogo News Live Line, sales and leadership analyst, on how to bridge that little gap between the boomers and the millennials. It's just different approaches.
So we can all get along, basically.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe.
Kogo News Time, 6:46.